Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in the history of nations when a people rise not just to meet a challenge but to transcend it. Moments when vision, unity, and unyielding determination turn dreams into destiny. Today, we speak of such a moment, the remarkable transformation of India's air force from resilience to dominance, from regional power to global force, achieved not over centuries, but within the span of a single decade. It is a story not merely of machines, but of minds, not only of jets, but of justice, the justice of a nation claiming its rightful place among the skies of the world. The journey of India's rise in air power is not only a tale of technology, but a triumph of the human spirit of leadership, innovation, sacrifice, and unshakable belief in a brighter tomorrow. Let us reflect not just on how it was done, but why it was done, and what it tells us about the power of a united people when they dare to reach beyond the clouds. For as I have always believed, it always seems impossible until it is done. Let us begin. The transformation of India's air force into a global superpower did not begin with aircraft or arsenals, but with bold minds and unshakable conviction. True change always begins at the top with leadership that dares to dream, not for personal gain, but for the collective upliftment of a nation. In the face of evolving threats, shifting geopolitics, and technological revolutions, India's leaders chose a path not of complacency, but of courageous reinvention. What separates ordinary progress from exceptional transformation is vision, the ability to see far beyond the horizon, to prepare a nation not just for the challenges of today, but for the uncertainties of tomorrow. In the critical decade of transformation, India's top civil and military leadership dared to ask difficult questions. Were the structures in place truly serving the nation's defense? Was the Air Force equipped to lead in the skies of the 21st century? Were outdated systems and doctrines holding back the spirit of innovation? From those questions came bold answers. Strategic reforms were not delayed, but implemented with clarity and urgency. Bureaucratic inertia, long a stumbling block to progress, was confronted head-on. New frameworks of accountability and efficiency were introduced. Defense procurement was streamlined, overdue decisions were no longer postponed. Every bottleneck removed was a step closer to a new era. This transformation was not limited to equipment or spending. It was a shift in mindset. India moved from being a cautious buyer to a confident builder, from being dependent on imports to nurturing self-reliance. This mindset was made possible by leaders who understood that air power is not only about dominance, but about deterrence, not only about defense, but about dignity. Leadership also meant fostering unity among government branches, between the public and private sectors, and across the ranks of the armed forces. Silos were broken. Collaboration became the norm. Political will, military strategy, and industrial ambition converged toward a shared goal, to place India among the great aerial powers of the world. Most importantly, these reforms were grounded in ethical strength. The goal was never aggression or conquest. The mission was always clear peace through strength, sovereignty through preparedness, and security through vision. In doing so, India showed the world that true power is not measured in the weapons one holds, but in the principles one upholds while wielding them. Such leadership is not common. It does not shout to be heard. It speaks through results. It listens to the needs of the people and responds with integrity. The rise of India's Air Force into the ranks of the elite was not the achievement of one person or one institution. It was the triumph of collective will, disciplined strategy, and fearless innovation guided by leadership that understood that the sky was not the limit, but only the beginning. Certainly. Here's a 600-word expansion of Keynote 2. Rapid indigenous innovation and technology development in the inspirational, dignified tone of Nelson Mandela without heading or closing lines. Progress is never gifted. It is earned through courage, creativity, and persistence. For decades, India's defense sector bore the burden of dependency reliant on foreign technologies, tied to external timelines and vulnerable to shifting alliances, but a new era demanded a new path. It demanded that India look inward not in retreat, but in resurgence. This is where the seeds of indigenous innovation took root and began to bloom with remarkable speed and purpose. In just 10 years, India transformed itself from a consumer of technology to a creator of it. This transition did not occur in laboratories alone. It emerged from a national awakening that understood the cost of dependency and the value of sovereignty. Scientists, engineers, and visionaries across the country were given a clear mandate to build not just for today's threats, but for tomorrow's superiority, and they responded with inventions that once seemed distant dreams. The development of advanced indigenous aircraft like the LCA Tejas marked more than the birth of a fighter jet. It marked the rise of national confidence. Systems once considered too complex or too ambitious, such as next-generation radars, stealth technology, and electronic warfare suites, began emerging from Indian soil with increasing frequency. Research and development, long underfunded and overlooked, was placed at the center of defense planning. Institutions like DRDO, HAL, and private sector partners became not just contractors but collaborators in a shared mission. Crucially, innovation was not limited to headline projects. India's transformation included quiet revolutions in avionics, missiles, surveillance systems, and logistics networks. Each advancement was a piece of a larger puzzle, bringing India closer to complete self-reliance in the skies. The growth was not chaotic, but strategic, mapped against future threats and aligned with global standards. Indigenous drone programs, AI integration in targeting systems, and cutting-edge simulation training reflected a military no longer catching up with the future, but shaping it. Equally important was the ecosystem that supported this innovation. Startups were encouraged to enter the defense space. Young talent from across the country, from remote villages to elite institutions, found purpose in contributing to the nation's aerospace ambitions. Government policies such as Make in India and Atmanirbharbharat were not just slogans, they became engines that drove investment, risk-taking, and breakthroughs in defense technology. India also made a conscious decision to shift from licensed production to full intellectual ownership. No longer content with assembling foreign systems, the nation began building platforms that were born of its own ideas, suited for its unique terrain, doctrine, and strategic imperatives. In doing so, India not only built weapons, it built resilience, the resilience to withstand embargoes, the agility to innovate under pressure, and the pride of standing on its own technical feet. And yet, through all this growth, India's commitment to peace never wavered. Its innovations were aimed not at domination, but deterrence. Its technologies were guided by responsibility, not recklessness. The choice to innovate was not a choice to intimidate, it was a decision to defend with dignity and foresight. This extraordinary burst of innovation within a single decade showed the world that greatness is not bound by history nor limited by resources. It proved that when a nation trusts its people, equips its minds, and dares to lead with purpose, there is no frontier it cannot cross. India's rise in the skies began not with metal, but with the fire of imagination, and that fire now lights the path for generations to come, certainly. Here is a 600-word expansion of Keynote 3, Global Partnerships and Smart Diplomacy, written in the dignified, wise, and motivational tone of Nelson Mandela, without heading or closing sentences. No nation rises to greatness in isolation. While self-reliance is the foundation of true strength, strategic partnerships are the wings that allow it to soar. In the journey of transforming its air force into a global superpower within a decade, India understood that wisdom lies not in turning away from the world, but in choosing carefully who to walk with and how. In this regard, diplomacy and defense merged into a single, purposeful strategy, to build not just alliances of convenience, but partnerships of vision. India embraced the world not with desperation, but with dignity. Its global outreach was grounded in mutual respect, not dependency. It did not ask what others could do for it alone. It sought to learn, to contribute, and to grow together. This principle guided its engagement with major powers, regional allies, and emerging partners alike. Whether acquiring next-generation platforms or co-developing new technologies, India positioned itself not merely as a buyer, but as a partner, one that brought capability, scale, and integrity to the table. Key partnerships with countries like France, the United States, Russia, and Israel played crucial roles in fast-tracking capabilities. But what made these alliances transformative was the way India approached them. Rather than simply importing finished systems, India negotiated transfer of technology, joint production, and long-term cooperation. The Rafale deal was not just about aircraft, it was about strategic deterrence, air dominance, and geopolitical signaling. The S-400 acquisition reflected not just technical sophistication, but independent foreign policy. Drone and missile collaborations with Israel demonstrated how shared interests could lead to rapid innovation and integration. These relationships were not forged in haste. They were the outcome of deliberate, calculated diplomacy. India's leadership projected confidence and clarity in every forum, not begging for support, but offering shared prosperity, regional stability, and peaceful cooperation as its terms of engagement. In bilateral talks, defense summits, and strategic dialogues, India's vision was consistent: to be a force for peace and to be prepared to protect it. Equally important was India's engagement with regional allies and multilateral frameworks. The strengthening of ties with nations across Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa showed that India's air power ambitions were not regional threats, but regional reassurance. Joint exercises like Garuda, Red Flag, and Indra built not just technical interoperability, but mutual trust. Air-to-air engagements became platforms for diplomacy in motion, showing the world that India could not only defend its skies, but uplift the collective security of others. Moreover, India was careful to balance its relationships in a complex, multipolar world. It did not lean entirely toward one bloc or ideology. Instead, it charted its own path, respecting old allies while embracing new ones, protecting its interests without compromising its principles. In a world often divided by suspicion, India emerged as a partner that others could rely on, stable, principled, and forward-looking. This blend of diplomatic finesse and strategic clarity ensured that India's Air Force was not only better equipped, but better positioned on the global stage. It opened doors to sensitive technologies, accelerated training exchanges, and even helped influence global defense narratives in India's favor. The message was clear: India's rise in the skies was not a threat to peace, but a testament to it. The genius of this approach lay in its balance between autonomy and cooperation, between national pride and global responsibility. India showed that one can embrace the world without losing oneself. And in doing so, it proved that true leadership in the air begins with wisdom on the ground, the wisdom to build bridges where others build walls, and to use strength not as a show of force, but as a promise of peace. Certainly. Here is a 600-word expansion of Keynote 4, modernization of training and infrastructure in the elevated and visionary tone inspired by Nelson Mandela without heading or closing sentences. No matter how advanced the aircraft, how powerful the engines, or how precise the systems, the strength of an air force rests in the skill and discipline of its people. Machines alone do not win wars or protect peace. It is the human being behind the controls, trained to act with precision, wisdom, and calm under pressure, who makes the difference. India's transformation into an aerial superpower was not achieved by technology alone. It was built upon the tireless modernization of training methods and infrastructure across every level of the force. The first step in this journey was a deep and honest reassessment. Training that had once relied on outdated systems and conventional patterns was scrutinized in the light of modern warfare. It became clear that tomorrow's pilots, engineers, and commanders would need more than just courage. They would need new tools, new environments, and new ways of thinking. And so India set about redefining what it meant to be combat-ready in the 21st century. Flight academies across the nation were upgraded with simulators that could replicate the complexity of modern multi-role missions. The line between theory and reality began to fade as virtual reality, AI, and data-driven feedback replaced rote memorization. The young cadets who once trained on analog systems now practiced real-time scenarios against simulated threats that reflected modern enemy tactics and electronic warfare challenges. This was not training for yesterday's battlefield. This was preparation for the invisible wars of tomorrow. Simultaneously, ground crews, intelligence officers, and air defense units received specialized instruction tailored to the demands of a networked and integrated battlefield. Doctrine shifted from isolated missions to joint operations. Inter-service coordination between the Army, Navy, and Air Force was no longer an aspiration, it became routine. War rooms were connected by secure digital grids. Decision-making became faster, smarter, and rooted in real-time data. Leadership at all levels was empowered, and responsibility was distributed with trust and clarity. Modernization also extended to the very spaces where defense took shape: the airbases, maintenance hangars, logistical chains, and radar stations. New airbases were constructed with strategic foresight, placed in forward locations with rapid deployment capacity. Existing infrastructure was hardened against attack and expanded to accommodate newer, larger, and more diverse aircraft. Fueling stations, repair depots, and command centers were automated and shielded, ensuring that readiness was not a slogan but a standing condition. What made this modernization powerful was not just its scale, but its inclusivity. Private companies and academic institutions were invited to contribute to research and training. Veteran officers became mentors and advisors in civilian aerospace programs. The youth of India were inspired not only to join the Air Force, but to contribute to its excellence through engineering, design, and technology. The national identity began to see defense not just as a duty of the few, but as a shared pride of the many. Through it all, a culture of continuous learning was established. Promotions and roles were no longer tied only to time served, but to talent shown. Mistakes were studied, not hidden. Successes were shared, but never taken for granted. The ethos of the Indian Air Force evolved into one where every officer and airman, regardless of rank, felt ownership over the mission and the machine. This revolution in training and infrastructure was quiet, steady, and often invisible to the public eye. But its impact resounded in every successful sortie, every life saved, and every threat neutralized before it could even begin. It was proof that when a nation chooses to modernize not only its tools, but its mindset, it creates a force that is not only feared by adversaries but trusted by its people and honored by the world. Of course. Here is a 600-word expansion of Keynote 5, Empowerment of Brave Air Warriors, written in a voice inspired by the wisdom, humility, and inspiration of Nelson Mandela, without a heading or ending paragraph. At the heart of every transformation lies the individual, the one who wakes before dawn, trains in the dust and the skies, and stands ready to defend with discipline and honor. Behind every aircraft that streaks across the heavens is a human being of unmatched resolve, courage, and clarity. In India's journey to build a superpower air force in just 10 years, it was the empowerment of the men and women in uniform that proved to be the most powerful engine of change. For years, India's air warriors had served with distinction, but with limited resources and recognition. Their bravery was never in question, but the systems supporting their growth had lagged behind. True reform came when the leadership began to view these warriors not as mere instruments of defense, but as the soul of national security. Policies shifted to reflect a simple but profound belief that those who guard the skies must themselves be elevated in every possible way. This empowerment began with opportunity. Talent was identified early, nurtured intentionally, and given space to grow. Promotions were increasingly based on merit, not just tenure. Young officers with vision and ability were entrusted with responsibilities that once took decades to earn. The cockpit was no longer reserved for the few, it was open to the best, regardless of background. This created a culture of excellence where air warriors felt not only pride, but purpose. A significant milestone in this transformation was the full integration of women into combat roles, including fighter squadrons. It was not just a symbolic victory, it was a message to the nation and the world that courage knows no gender. These women, flying supersonic jets and operating in high-risk zones, became icons of a new India, one where the uniform represents equality, capability, and honor above all. Support systems were restructured to prioritize the mental, physical, and emotional well-being of every airman and officer. Training no longer focused solely on physical strength or technical precision, it addressed leadership, ethics, adaptability, and emotional resilience. Veterans were brought into the fold to share hard-earned wisdom, and peer-to-peer mentoring programs strengthened unity across ranks. Living conditions on bases were improved, families were included in welfare programs, and educational opportunities were extended to dependents. A warrior who knows that their family is safe and valued fights not just with duty, but with devotion. The spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood among the ranks grew stronger, for they were no longer bound just by uniform, but by a deep sense of shared mission and mutual respect. Beyond the borders of India, these air warriors became ambassadors of professionalism and peace. Whether participating in humanitarian missions, international exercises, or disaster relief operations, they carried with them the dignity of their nation and the discipline of their training. They were not just defenders of territory, they were carriers of values, and the world began to notice. Empowerment also meant listening. For too long, those on the front lines had been expected to follow without voice. Now, feedback from pilots, technicians, and field officers was actively sought and incorporated into operational planning. The chain of command remained intact, but it was infused with trust and communication. Every individual understood that their insight mattered, that their courage was matched by the country's commitment to their growth. In the cockpit, under the stars, or stationed at forward bases, India's air warriors became not only stronger, but free to innovate, to lead, to grow, and to represent a new era of Indian strength. Their empowerment was not just a military decision, but a moral one. For a nation that values freedom must first ensure that those who defend it are themselves empowered in spirit, in service, and in self worth.